welcome to today's episode at TSARP. I'm your host, Andrew Weir, and today we have Lewis as our very special guest.
Whoa! Who's that?
That's you. You
Oh.
just said that. You're
Oh,
you're the guest, yes. So, how are you doing today, Lewis?
I'm doing all right for a sick person.
Good. So, as you probably saw in the title, everybody, that today we're going to be giving you 5 tips, tricks, skills that you need to learn to be the best programmer you can be. So, these will hopefully help you, and they're good for pretty much any type of development, from web development to any type of software development. So, the first tip, which I think is pretty important to learn, is database management. So, people are going to think, hey, that's really just for backend and stuff, but it goes for really anything. If you're working on a desktop program, you're going to need to have to store data somewhere, or if it's on the web too. So learning how to manage like SQL and even Firebase and other databases like that will help you a lot with different jobs and stuff that you might get down the line and other projects that you just want to do on your own. So having a basic knowledge of database management and the other skills we talk about will help you a lot in other fields. So another very important thing to learn is data structures. So this kind of goes with our database management, but not basic stuff like variables and lists and arrays and that stuff, but like high level stuff. Like, I mean, it's a meme at this point, but like just binary lists and binary trees and stuff like that are important to learn because it kind of gives you a good idea of how to organize different data and how you could do stuff a lot easier than how you're doing it already. And with a lot of these skills, you can go into past projects or projects you're working on right now and implement them, and maybe they'll help, and maybe you'll learn something. So they're all good to learn. So our third tip of the day is be proficient in one programming language. So say I'm really good at Python, but I'm also learning JavaScript, and I'm not, but say I'm learning Rust, right? I want to be good at one thing while learning others because I don't just want to be okay at Python, okay at Java. I want to be good at one, and then I can learn others. But I don't want to just like learn the basics and then go to another thing because I'll forget how to do stuff in Python if I don't really learn it before I move on to another language. So it's one thing if you're learning like HTML, CSS, and JavaScript at one point, because you're using them constantly together. But something different like Python to Rust, I don't want to just learn print statements and variables in Python because I'll forget them if I go and move on to something like Rust. So it's good to have good knowledge in something before you move on. So for our fourth tip is be able to write clean code, right? Don't like use a ton of variables and make it all messy and use for I statements and like make it messy to where someone else can't read them. Because if you're working on a big team, you need to have efficient code and you need to have readable code. Because say I'm working at Google and I'm making a new function for the search engine, and then my friend comes along and he has to write some code, but he doesn't know what I just did. It's going to make it a lot more complicated for him to then change it. And kind of the fifth tip kind of goes a lot with the fourth, where you want to learn how to write good documentation. So that's for open source technologies, or just like if you're on a team, you want to be able to write, okay, this is what this code does, this piece does that, that's how that all goes together. And also write comments in your code. Comments are very useful for kind of saying this piece does this. Like overall documentation kind of gives an overview. But if you do comments on each line, that will give people a good idea of what everything is doing. And that goes for all languages, not just Python, not just Java, not just JavaScript, but really any visual language too, like Scratch. Like if you're into Scratch games and stuff, they have functions for taking notes. So, Lewis, do you want to give us an extra bonus tip?
You have to be good.
have to be good to write good code. Well, sure, that works. You want to make sure you know what you're doing before you jump into it. Now, what I do a lot is I say, okay, this is a project I want to do, and then I just jump into it without knowing anything, which is good in some ways because you'll learn specific things for a language that you aren't going to learn in a normal tutorial. So, like, creating cookies in JavaScript might not always come up in a basic JavaScript tutorial, but you'll learn it in another project where you're just actually coding in JavaScript. So that's why sometimes I like to just jump in without knowing anything and then learn it as I go. Or sometimes it's good to follow a course, but you also don't want to get stuck where you're just coding with a tutorial and not knowing what that code does and not making your own code, just copying someone else's. Because that's not really programming, that's just copying and pasting, looking and typing, So you want to make sure you really know what's going on and know how to do it yourself. So, Lewis, have you used these tips in the past to improve your code?
Yeah. I'm good, I think.
Yeah, and definitely if you learn these skills, you will get a lot better. But even if you don't know some of them right now, it doesn't mean you're not good. Maybe it's just not something that you do a lot in your development environment or your field, because like even though a lot of these do go for many different programming languages, not all of them really need databases or stuff. Like if you're doing a lot of, say, like data organizing, are you going to need to know databases and data structures? Definitely, right? But if you're doing CSS styling, are you really going to need to know databases and data structures? No. But will you move into another form of development at some point? Like if you move into JavaScript and you like that more than CSS design and HTML, then you definitely are going to need to know variables and lists and that stuff. So it is important to kind of like look at different types of development and see what you like, because I didn't like HTML when I first started. I liked Python a lot. But then I started doing more of it and more of it, and I decided, hey, this is pretty good too. So I like both, but at first I didn't think I did like HTML and JavaScript. So it's good to look for different development paths and, do a bunch of them and see what you like the best. And you can do multiple. Like if I say, okay, I like Python, I like HTML. Right now I'm going to do Python. And maybe in a few months I'll make a project with HTML and JavaScript. So yeah, those are our 5 tips and some bonus tips to help you improve as a programmer. And yeah, these are really useful, so make sure you try to apply these to your projects. And yeah, so I hope they helped. Thank you all for watching, and this was TSARP. See you in the next one. Bye-bye.